back to another episode of Wicked Darkness. I'm Kathy, your host, and with me tonight I got Debbie.
Oh,
I got Mika.
Hey.
I got Steve. Oh my gosh, I'm
Hello.
Renee.
Hello.
And Andy.
hi.
If you're wondering what's happening, I'm having some kind of stuttering problem. I don't know what my deal is, but it is what it is. We'll just roll with it right now. All right, so we're going to be talking about Gettysburg. Gettysburg is in Pennsylvania for those of you that don't know. I don't know how you would not know unless you are from a different country, but Gettysburg is this little itty bitty town just about an hour and a half northwest of Washington, D.C. You kind of blink and you're going to miss it. It's a very tiny town. But it's a very significant town when it comes to the United States and our history. Going back to 1863, actually before that, we had what was called the Civil War. And it divided our country pretty significantly, where we had brothers fighting against brothers, cousins fighting against cousins. It split families up. And it was something that was heartbreaking for our history. But thank God we were able to come together again as a one nation. And now we're looking, 100 plus years. Actually, what are we at now? Where are we at? 100, we were just talking about math. 150, 160 years now we're at, something like that. And so the battle did not start in Gettysburg, but the majority of the battle of Civil War was very significant as far as the casualties and stuff like that. And Gettysburg, surprisingly, even though it's like one of the most talked about battle of the Civil War, is only in the top 15% of the battles that was taking place during that time. It's not even in the top 5, not even in the top 3, but top 15. And to give a little history of Gettysburg itself, like I said, it's a little town in Pennsylvania. At the time, it was a population of about 2,000. But for having only 2,000 people living there, it was an up-and-coming kind of town. They had 3 newspapers, 3 institutions of higher learning, 3 newspapers, 2 institutions of higher learning, and several churches and banks in this little town. And so when you think about that town, that's a lot of things going on in this little itty-bitty square of Pennsylvania. Here's the thing, though. There are 10 roads that come into Gettysburg, and that is what brought Gettysburg to the forefront of these battles. It was by chance that it had happened. At the time, General Meade, who was the commanding officer of the Union soldiers, was heading towards Maryland. And Robert E. Lee, who was the general for the Confederates, was heading towards the north. He heard that they were going north, and he thought, okay, we've been beating the Union down every step we have gone pretty much. And I think if we do a battle in the north and we solidify that win, it is going to prompt them to start negotiating to have them succeed to the south. And so he was very confident that they were going to win. And so he had his men go towards Pennsylvania area, but not towards Gettysburg. There was another town that they were heading to, but they wanted to get some more supplies and stuff like that. And it just so happened that the Union and the Confederate were going through the area at the same exact time. And they had seen each other over the hills. Now, if you ever been to Gettysburg, it's not flat ground. It is hilly. but there is some places in the battlefield that is flat. But at the higher ground area, they could see who was moving where. The first day of the fighting. Now, let me back that up. The the amount of soldiers that went into Gettysburg. Now, we talked about Gettysburg only being 2,000 soldiers or 2,000 people there. But when the Union and the Confederate came together for that big clash, at the time, they had 165,000 men between the two armies. 165,620. 93,921 were Union, and 71,699 were Confederate. That's a lot of people. That's like the size of Kenosha or Racine area in Little Gettysburg. So that's a lot of men there. On the first day of fighting, which when this battle happened, it was July 1st, 1863, very hot. And mind you, these guys wore wool clothes, so it was even hotter for them. First day of fighting, 50,000 soldiers fought. 15,000 were either killed, wounded, or captured. On the second day, at least 100,000 soldiers fought. 20,000 were killed, wounded, or captured on the second day. And then by the time the battle was done, there was an estimated casualty of 51,112 total between the Union and the Confederate. Of the Union, there was 23,049 that were either killed, wounded, or captured. Of the Confederate, there's 28,063. The Union had 3,155 men killed. The Confederate had 3,903 killed. So right there, you're looking at 7,000 men dead on the grounds. The streets in Gettysburg was filled with blood. There was nowhere you could walk that there wasn't a body laying. There wasn't blood flowing. It was a gruesome sight. And again, it's July. What happens with bodies? They start to decompose. They start to smell. Can you imagine the smell, just the look of everything that is going around you? These poor people just wanted to live their lives, and then they found themselves in the middle of a battle. 14,000 of the Union, 14,529 were wounded of the Union. 18,735 were wounded of the Confederate. And then 5,365 were missing or captured from the Union, and 5,425 were either missing or captured from the Confederacy. So again, that's a lot of men either killed or wounded. And people were trying to live their lives, and they were trying to, try to take care of these soldiers that were wounded. They didn't care at that point. You got a soldier in front of you that's dying. They're trying to take care of them. Some people opened their homes to the soldiers to stay in. Some, turned into a hospital. The colleges turned into hospitals, different things. During this battle, though, there was also 120 generals present during the battle of those 3 days. 120 generals. 9 were killed or mortally wounded. That's a lot. And so it's no wonder that Gettysburg is teeming with energy from the past. It's soaked into the ground. And so Gettysburg is known as a very haunted location now. And we're going to be talking about some of those locations. We're going to be talking about Devil's Den. We're going to be talking about the Jenny Wade House. And we're also going to be talking about the Farnsworth home. And, we'll also talk about one of the first generals that passed away on the very first day. So with that, um, we'll talk about the general first. That would be General Reynolds. He's a major general. He was killed, like I said, the very first day. Like they just got there, started having the battle, and he was really close to the front lines, and too close actually. And when he was out there with his men, he ended up getting mortally wounded. And he had a fiance. Her name was Catherine. Catherine was in town as well. And they ended up taking him to uh, one of the homes. It's called, and it sounds funny, but it's the George house. And that was the gentleman's name that owned the home. Now it's known as the Major General Reynolds death home. But for people that go there now, it's an old times picture place. So, those old gray or sepia kind of pictures that you can wear your costumes or whatever. That's what it is now. Um, they brought him there, and that's where he ended up dying. And there's a rumor that when he was laying there dying, that his blood had soaked into the boards of the building and just seeped into the boards, and his essence is still there. Catherine ended up passing away in 1895, so she outlived him, obviously, by many years. But she is still known to be haunting that location as well. And there was a movie that was taking place in Gettysburg, known as Gettysburg. Samuel L. Jackson was in it. Or Samuel L. Jackson. I'm sorry, Samuel Elliott. He was in there. And I'm trying to think who else was in there. But it's is like a trilogy thing. So they talked about Gettysburg, and then there was Gods and Generals and stuff like that. And so the extras would come into the town, and they would stay in Gettysburg. And the lady that was transporting the extras back and forth from the set to downtown area where they were staying, she noticed on her way there that in the back of her vehicle that there were some soldiers that never got out of her vehicle. She thought was odd. And she's driving through downtown area, and these guys are still there. And she turned around and he's gone. Some of these extras were walking through the downtown area at night, which, Gettysburg is still a hopping place even today. And they were walking past the George house, and they saw a woman in period clothing, mourning clothing, actually, wearing all black. And there in the front window was an officer laying in state, and she obviously was upset and everything. And they saw this whole funeral, like a wake going on in front of them in this building. And like, oh my gosh, these people are really taking this whole, going back in time and really playing their parts as, these Union and Confederate soldiers and stuff like that, thinking that they were, playing a role. But then they went back the next day, and they found out that that was just a image that they saw, a brief moment in time that happened over 100 years ago. And when they went past the window again, they see the costumes hanging and the photography equipment everywhere, and they're like, what's going on? There was just a funeral here last night. And the guy's like, no, there's never been a funeral here while I've owned the place. We take old time pictures. Are you sure you just didn't see somebody wearing a costume and they were playing it? And they're like, no, this was person in a casket, a woman sitting there mourning, the whole thing. And it's like, that never happened. They also have rumors that, or I should say claims that cards will fall off. They'll have cards laying out somewhere, and they'll fall just periodically, or they have some chains that are hanging in the building, and they will, rattle and move on their own with nobody touching them. I personally have been to Gettysburg, and I was at the building next door, which is kind of like a little general store, not a general store, it's a souvenir shop. And I've told people this before, I had to use the restroom, which was downstairs. Well, down below, these two buildings share a walkway in the basement. And when I went to the bathroom, I felt like I needed to get out of there quickly. Like something did not want me down in that basement area. And so it was like that heaviness that I felt. And I didn't know it at the time that that was the building that was the George house. So I did feel that, and it was coming from that hallway. So it wasn't in the bathroom itself, but the hallway and the door going over into the George house that I felt that presence. There's supposed to be 4 spirits that haunt the George house, which would be the general himself, which he has known to be seen in the location besides, his death scene, his fiance, and then a teenage boy, and then another one that is very mischievous, and they call that spirit the liar. So I don't know if that was my encounter with the liar or not, but all I know is I felt like I needed to get out of that basement quickly. And so that was my personal experience in that building. And like I said, I didn't know that that was the one until I got back home and I did some more research, and I'm like, holy crap, that was that one. So with that, you go down the street a little bit farther and you have I should say the Farnsworth house. And that is, like a dining place now too, and a museum. But the Farnsworth house, is haunted as well. Very well known. Andy, do you want to talk about the Farnsworth house?
Sure. Okay, so the Farnsworth House was built in 1810. It's had several owners over the course of since 1810. The reason the Confederate soldiers decided that this was a good house is because it's only about, I think they said, a mile from where the main battle happened. Also, there's a window up in their in their attic. Outside that window, you had a real nice vantage point of Devil's Den. So they could see the soldiers coming up over Devil's Den, and they placed their snipers there. And apparently they did a lot of damage, those snipers, which to me sounds horrible. They're in an attic in July. I can't imagine how hot it was in full uniform. There is also, if you go to the house, there's bullets still in the brick today. You can see them, artillery all over the brick. They say that there's 16 ghosts that haunt the Farnsworth house. They do have a museum, they have a bar, and it's an operating bed and breakfast. You can stay there. And then they do tours, like paranormal tours, and you can actually investigate for 4 hours. And then they have a junior paranormal investigator night. So they definitely are like their ghosts there. They have a lot of different rooms, and one of the ghosts they talk about that's the most active there is actually a ghost of a little boy named Jeremy. He obviously didn't die in the Civil War. He was playing hide and seek around the horse carriages and got ran over by a horse carriage. And they brought him into the house, and he died in the house. And I want to say he's got his own designated room in the bed and breakfast. They've named a lot of their rooms, like there's a Jenny Wade room, there's a I forget her name, Black room. She used to own the house, and a lot of the owners have their own rooms. There's a Schultz room, but they seem to see him the most. I watched some of the other paranormal investigators with their evidence, and one person was like playing marbles, and for whatever reason, the marble was moving back and forth. Another paranormal investigator said every time he'd close a drawer that had marbles and toys in it, that his little EVP would go off, like, don't close the drawer. So there were some cool things out on YouTube to watch about the house. But yeah, they say there's 16 spirits. Most of them are Confederate soldiers. A lot of Confederate soldiers died when the Union stormed the house to kill those snipers because they were doing so much damage in the battle. The house is named after General Farnsworth, who was a Union general, and he charged the Confederacy, and all 65 and him and his men died at that battle. I'm not entirely sure why they picked the Farnsworth house, but they do. The house itself is kind of neat. Like I said, they'll just do tours too. You can go see the attic. They have a haunted basement. After the battle, that was one of the places where they had the field hospital set up, and they think that's why they have so many hauntings. In the basement, they also say that that's where like the limbs were stacked real high, because it was a field hospital. So it's a lot of the same stories you hear, but they consider themselves the most haunted in the United States, which I believe. Like, there is a lot of killing and bad things that happen there, a lot of bad energy. And now my pizza's here, so you're gonna have to edit this out. Of course, now it comes.
That's okay. We roll with it. That's how we go. Pizza delivery guy, takes precedent. So like she was saying that the Farnsworth, they have a lot of activity. And I was watching a little documentary about it, and they were talking about that the Confederate soldier upstairs, in the attic area where you can go up there during their tours and stuff like that. There's a tiny little window area, and that's the window that the snipers would go out. And there was a tour guide that went up there who was, just talking to the people, and then he saw out of the corner of his eye, they have like a little half door to that area, and he saw a Confederate, or at least it looked like a Confederate soldier, kind of like leaning on the door and just kind of listening to him talk, like, yep, yep, you just keep telling the story, and then, and so it took him a second. He looked away and looked back, and the guy was gone. And he's like, well, that was just weird. But he said it makes sense that, that was the Confederate area that the snipers hung out. I was just telling about that window up on the
If you go online and you Google the Farnsworth house, like I said, and besides YouTube had all these paranormal investigators that would have their little clips and stuff, but they show that window a lot. And they actually, like you said, have it set up like a museum. It's cordoned off. They have like a bed he would have and a rifle like next to the bed he would be laying on. And they kind of keep it very true to the time, like the, Civil War time. Even the rooms, like the wallpaper, and they wallpapered the ceiling, and it would be like gold with butterflies. And it was kind of neat to see. I'm going to yell at my dog. Rocket. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
I usually am the one yelling at my dog, so I'm glad it's somebody else this time.
Yeah. Yeah, so when you go online, it's pretty cool to see. Now, they did also talked about a spirit. It's in the Sarah Black room. No, that's where they think Jeremy hangs out the most. It's the Schultz room, who's are the owners now. And they think she was a midwife at some point and worked at the hospital. And there's like, no one talked about any like verified record that she died there, but they said like she's very matronly, like she's been known to like cover people up or, kind of do things for them. They talked about another Confederate soldier. I think they called him Walter. They didn't say he was very nice, that he, but they didn't make it sound like he was like an evil or bad entity or anything like that. And then another person complained about there's a cranky cook in the kitchen that doesn't like people messing around in her kitchen and pull on aprons and spin servers around and do all sorts of stuff like that. So definitely sounds like a hot spot. And it was called, I think, the Sleepy Hollow at that time when they took it over.
I believe they still have up in the attic area. There is a sign I thought I saw Um,
It's a
Just
sleepy
saw that
hollow.
today. It says Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy
Yeah.
Hollow. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, but the Farnsworth, that ties into the Jenny Wade house.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
They
and
believe that one of the sharpshooters, you know, missed and his bullet went through the house, Jenny Wade's house, and killed her. And she's the only civilian that was killed during the Civil War while she was making bread. So
Is
I
that
don't
the house that's directly across the street? Because I just read and watched something today that said actually, because now it's the Civil War Museum, it's directly across from the Jenny Wade house.
um, it's
And
no, I think the Farnsworth, if I remember correctly, was down a block from the Jenny Wade house. Uh,
so the building that what I was looking at today or reading about today, directly across from the Jenny Wade house,
mhm.
um, which is now the Civil War Museum, was also an orphanage.
Yes.
Um, but but they were just where there was a little video clip of a Forsnick music scientist came there, and they think the bullet came from that house. That was there, looking at her height and the trajectory of the bullet, that it came from the across the street
Hmm.
from the Jenny Wade house. That was their theory. I was watching that today,
that
which is weird. Is what's that?
I was just gonna
Go ahead.
say, I mean, it's probably just another, you know, tourist kind of trap. They have a picture of Jenny Wade right as you go up into the attic. So like you're looking and they talk about her while you're up there. So it's, did it really come from their house? Who knows where it came from? Is it
Well, I
another magic
mean,
bullet like JFK,
well, the
But
Jenny Wade house had 150 bullet holes in it.
Hmm.
yeah.
So that's really hard to tell. I mean, it's 150 bullets. Also, an unexploded cannonball landed in that attic. So I mean, there was so much chaos
Yeah.
going on at that time, with battles going on. Who knows? But this was just this theory of this doctor who said that it came direct directly across the street. That's what his theory was. But again, with bullets flying everywhere, I mean, hundreds and hundreds at the same time. Who
I'm
knows?
sure mass chaos.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, Steve, you had the Jenny Wade house that you were going to talk about. Why don't you
Well, it
expand on
really
that?
wasn't her house. It was her sister's house.
Mhm.
And during the battle, her and her family decided that the sister's house would be a little bit safer, a little bit farther away from the battle at that time. Constructed better, constructed, very heavy brick. They thought this would be a safer place. But by the time her and her mother and her brother and I forgot there was one other child that they were taking care of.
Mhm.
By the time they got there, the battle was raging right there as well. One thing that Jenny Wade and her family did this whole time was make bread for the troops. They were feeding the Union troops as much as they could, loaves of bread between lulls and battles. So they moved to the sister's house. Battles raging, going on, going on. There was a little lull. Her and her brother ran out to get some water to make some more bread. So she was making some bread. Um, right when she started making the bread, the bullet came through the upstairs window of her sister, who had just had a baby. And that's another reason why they figured they'd go over there, because her sister had a baby like 5 days before. So they wanted her to take care of the sister and the baby. Bullet came through the upstairs. I don't remember, it was a window. I think it was the window though, and hit the bedboard um, where the sister was laying with the newborn baby. Um, Minutes after that, um, Jenny Wade was kneading dough to make bread. Bullet passed through two doorways, hit her in the shoulder, and then moved down into her heart. So by the time she hit the floor, she had passed away. Um, the troops that were stationed around the house heard the family screaming, so they got them out of there and took them down into a basement. Um, Now, the house is like a museum of the living quarters of the times of the Civil War. But it's a lot of the same furniture and things are still in that house. The two doors that the bullets went through are still there, and the blood is still on the floor where she fell down and passed away. One of a kind of a side note, kind of weird thing to all this as well is that, well, she had a fiance who was in the Union troops. He was wounded, and had to get a message into Gettysburg to let her know that he was wounded, but he was okay. It never got to her. She died, so neither one of them ever got to know that the other one had passed away. One of the things they say that is if single women go and stick their ring finger in the hole in the door, that shortly after that, they'll be married. They'll get engaged and be married. And every year, tons and tons of emails and mail comes to the Jenny Wade house saying, yeah, we did that. We put our fingers in the door and I'm married now. Kind of a weird thing. As far as paranormal goes there's not a lot of stuff. It depends what you watch. Again, my arch enemy, Zach Baggins. If you watch him, everything there is the devil. But really what people mostly report is seeing her in the kitchen or walking outside back and forth from the front door towards the street where she would get water and take the bread to the troops. Smell baking bread. Her perfume, lilac was her favorite smell of a perfume, odor of a perfume. So they smell lilac. People hear voices sometimes in the basement where they took her body before they moved it to a cemetery. A kind of a thing, and I just saw today was they've been starting to get voices of children in the basement there. This has just happened recently, apparently. And they think it's the children that were in the orphanage across the street because the family would treat the kid, give them bread and stuff because let's face it, the orphanage, at the time of the Civil War was not a great place to be. They had a headmistress there who they figured beat the children, tortured them. They had the basement was called the dungeon by the children. There was a hole she would put the worst kids in 6 feet in the ground, leave them there for days and days in the dark. So they think some of the children, the spirits of the children have come across the street to the Jenny Wade house where they would hide in the basement once in a while just to get away from the orphanage and his headmistress. So that's relatively new. I just read about that today. But
she also had she had a teenage boy that worked with her, like her little minion. He was known as the stick boy.
Yep. And I just really found out about that today, that they were getting these voices of children in the basement. Everything I've read about it, though, and things I've watched, nothing seems evil or, it's just her spirit baking bread. And they think when she's going outside, that's either she was going out to give the troops food and water and also looking for her fiance who never came back from the war. So, but yeah, it's interesting, but nothing that's really, nothing evil.
Yeah.
I keep on disappearing.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird.
Paranormal.
I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, so very interesting. Like I said, they had the unexploded cannonball up in the attic. I could have been a lot worse. I know that she has her permanent resting place is in the cemetery next to her or very close to her fiance. And she has a permanent flag flown day and night. And also, I forgot to mention, her family was given a pension by the government after the war for being not only the only civilian killed in Gettysburg during the battle, but they considered her then a member of the military, so to speak, because she died helping out the troops.
Yeah, you talked about the flag. She is one of two females in the United States that has that permanent flag.
Yep.
Her and Betsy Ross are the only two.
Yes.
And yeah, she's down the street at Cemetery Ridge. That's where the cemetery is at.
She was
Kind of
moved
a big
three
cemetery.
times. Her body was moved 3 times. That was
Yeah.
her fun.
Well, you talked about the soldiers brought her down because her family was, screaming and everything. They brought the whole family down into the basement, but they also brought Jenny's body down there. So can you
Right. Yes, they
imagine
brought her body down there.
being there with your dead family member in the middle of, in the middle of summer, and you're laying there, wondering if things are going to happen? Because like you said, the house was a mile away from the battlefield, which doesn't seem very far, but back in the day, that was pretty far. So they thought they were safe, but then the skirmish started heading towards the town.
Yep.
And unfortunately, there, when you go to Gettysburg now, there's a lot of things around the Jenny Wade house. Hotels, gas stations, and stuff like that. But back in the day, there wasn't. There was the orphanage across the street, like you talked about, and then a couple buildings, were farther down a couple of blocks. But they thought that they were safe being a mile away from the battle. Yeah. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And like I said, they had to be down there until the soldiers told them it was okay to come out. But by that time, you walk out and you're seeing death everywhere. So now they've got Jenny, who has now been dead for a while, and they got to bring her body up. They got to bury her. Where do you, at that point, they're just digging holes and pushing bodies into them.
That's the one thing I did, let me interrupt you, but the one thing I'm not sure is how long they actually were in that basement. I don't know if it was hours or a day or.
Good.
I never really saw that.
Well, I'm not really sure. I can't remember. I mean, I've been to the Jenny Wade house, so walked in, but I didn't actually do the tour at the time. But we're talking about the battle coming close to the Jenny Wade house. But the battlefield is pretty big. I mean, this place, Gettysburg, is the battlefield itself is pretty large. Debbie, you had the Devil's Den, which was day 2 of the battle. That was a focal point, was Devil's Den area, Little Round Top, all that's area. You want to talk about that while we're looking up about how long Jenny was in her room or her basement?
Sure. What is the story of Devil's Den? On July 2nd, 1863, the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, the area around Devil's Den saw intense fighting as part of General Robert E. Lee's flank attacks when Lieutenant General James Longstreet's Confederate corps attacked the divisions of Major General Daniel Sykes III Corps of the Army Potomac. Legend has it that local residents once believed that the crevices between the boulders there were home to an enormous snake. The snake was supposedly nicknamed the Devil, resulting in the entire area being dubbed Devil's Den. Despite the eccentricities, whatever, of local legend, the true origin of the name is uncertain. The boulders scattered across the landscape and the rocks of Devil's Den provided cover for the soldiers doing strategic defense. The boulders scattered across the landscape and the rocks of Devil's Den provided cover for the strategic defense positions. And they had said that Mother Nature, in all her glory, was ticked off about the war or something, and she had placed all these boulders on the hill so that the soldiers would have protection and sight to fight the other side.
No, I was reading about that. It said that they had put artillery up there because it overlooked so much of the battlefield that it could just rain down artillery from being up high enough. And what else did I read about that?
Yeah, when you go to Gettysburg and you go to a Little Round Top area, it does. It's above the battlefield and you're looking down. Now, when you're looking at it, it's kind of like a corkscrew kind of roadway through the battlefield. So Little Round Top is above Devil's Den area. So yeah, if they were up there, they had a great vantage point to see everything in front of them. And when they talk about having the high ground, that definitely was the high ground. I mean, yeah, there was higher ground behind it, but looking out on the battlefield, you couldn't get a better viewpoint of where everything was. And Devil's Den is literally down the hill. Like you trip and fall off of the Little Round Top area, you're going down. There is a walking trail down to the Devil's Den, but you're gonna like roll all the way down, like you'd see in a cartoon, all the way down into that rock formation. But Devil's Den was great cover for those that were down there in that area. They kind of built a little wall in the rock formation, and they've basically had their own little fortress of solitude, I guess you could say, in that little area. Did you find anything in particular about Devil's Den, Debbie, that was any kind of ghostly activities happening there?
No, I didn't find anything like that. But let's see. I think it was during the second day when they were fighting over the boulders or over that Devil's Den. There were 1,800 soldiers either dead, wounded, injured. So that's kind of sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we went there, we walked up to Devil's Den. Like you could park your car in this like little makeshift parking lot in the middle of the battlefield. But you could walk this little trail up into Devil's Den area. And like I said, they made like a rock wall of different rocks that were around them in between these two big boulder areas. And there's a picture of a soldier, I believe it was a Confederate soldier, who died there. And somebody back then decided they're going to snap a picture of him laying there dead. And people nowadays will say that they see that soldier laying there. I didn't see him when I was there, but there was a lot of people that were there while we were there. You kind of like walk into like this little cavern area. But there's two different sides. So one side is not the side that the soldier died on, the other side is. So depending on which side you're looking at, you may or may not see that soldier. But we didn't experience anything while we were there. But like I said, it was really hot and there was a lot of people in that area at that point.
I did read that there was reports of over the years of people seeing Confederate soldiers between the cracks in the rocks and between the rocks, that they would see Confederate and Union troops there.
There was a thing that I saw that was a gentleman that was kind of like poking the bear at the time. He's just a visitor at the battlefield. And something happened where he got like this excruciating pain that hit him out of nowhere, and he fell to the ground, and he felt as if somebody grabbed his arm and was dragging him down the hill to Devil's Den area. And like I said before, they dug holes. So in his mind, they thought he was dead because he had fallen over as if he got shot. And so it was a Confederate soldier that had his arm. And when he looked up, there were all these other Confederate soldiers, reaching out for him from this hole area by Devil's Den, trying to pull him in. And then out of nowhere, another arm came in, assuming it was a Union soldier, yanking him to his feet. Like, no, this guy isn't dead. Yanked him to his feet, and then everything just stopped. He didn't see the people anymore. He didn't feel anybody. The pain went away. But it was this brief moment that he was getting dragged down the hill, and then he was dragged up the hill and stood up. So could that be the Confederates that you were just talking about, that peeking through the cracks and stuff?
Because I know there was a woman who said that as she was climbing up there, they grabbed her ankle and were pulling down. Mm-hmm. And she kind of just glanced down and thought she saw faces, but just for a second. And then it's like they let go of her, and she went back her way up to the top of the ridge or whatever. But there seems to, I think I read there too, is that people see like a Confederate soldier standing up on the top of the ridge, like pointing to the artillery, where to shoot the artillery. It's near where they had set up their artillery to go down onto the battlefield. So
mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think that whole area is, you just read so much that there's just everything everywhere.
Well, yeah. I mean, when we were there, I can see, people confusing, and I'm not saying that they're not seeing like a phantom regiment or anything like that. But when we were there was a lot of reenactors that were there. We actually captured one that was a Union soldier standing at the top, drinking his coffee. And we were talking to the guy. The guy was cool. And we're like, hey, can we take this picture? Because you kind of look like back in 1863. Mm-hmm. And he's like, sure. And we're like, okay, face out towards the battlefield. And we were standing behind him. And then we took the picture of him. But if you're at the bottom of the hill, you could, he was kind of in he wasn't in the sun because he's wearing period clothing. It's really hot and everything. So he's kind of staying in the shade. But if you're at the bottom of the hill and you're looking up, you could think that that was a spirit of a Union soldier that you saw if you weren't paying attention. And then down in the battlefield itself, they had reenactors that were pitching tents, and they had like their little encampment there. Which was kind of nice because we got to go in there and we got to see everything. But it was kind of funny because some of the reenactors went over to their cars, and it kind of like took the essence away, because you're like, oh, here's the period clothing and all that stuff. You're laying in their tents and all that, and then all of a sudden you see one of them walk over to their pickup truck, pick up the cell phone, call mom or wife or whatever, and he's wiping himself down, pouring water, and getting in his air-conditioned truck and cooling off for a second, and then hopping back out. And I'm like, all right, man, can you do it behind scenes so nobody sees it? And then
wrecking the ambiance.
Right. And then even in town, the wives and the children, I'm assuming, of the reenactors were also reenactors, and they were pitching tents in like the yards and stuff like that. There was like this little community of reenactors, and they're all wearing their period clothing. The women are dressed up, and they're doing stuff that they were supposed to do back in 1863. Children are playing with the little, you see the little wheel with the stick. They were doing that down the sidewalk, and my kids were like, what are those? And I'm like, oh, those are the reenactors. And they're like, don't they have regular toys? And I'm like, they have to play with the toys from that time period. They're playing a role. with their parents. I'm assuming it's their parents. But I mean, that's everywhere in Gettysburg that they were doing these things while we were there. But again, they were marching, the guys were marching on the field. They're wearing either the Confederate or the Union. We're like zooming up, we're like, oh, we want to see this. And they do their formations, and they're, walking through where they're supposed to walk, how they're supposed to walk. I mean, these guys are really good at what they're doing. But if you're not paying attention and you get caught up in it, you could sit there and go, well, I don't know if that was a real person or if that was a spirit. And Gettysburg is pretty nice because they let you drive around even at nighttime up to a certain point. You can walk, drive around the battlefields and stuff in town. So there are things that happen in town, or I should say on the battlefields at nighttime, that people capture, apparitions. There's a famous one there's cannons that they have on the battlefield still, and they caught soldiers standing by the cannons, like at the ready, but you could see through them. So people were just driving down the road, and they're like, what is that? They take the video of it, and then all of a sudden, person's gone. And then they've seen things walking through the woods and stuff like that, white apparitions walking through the woods. And they assume it was the soldiers and stuff.
I just watched.
Oh, go ahead.
I watched a video today of you couldn't see anything, but you could hear. It was at night, late at night, on one of the battlefields, and you could hear cannon shot and musket shot.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently that happens quite often. There, sound of ammunition and cannons firing. Kind of creepy, actually, because you can hear it pretty well.
Well, and they'll shoot during the day. They'll shoot,
right, but this is late at night.
Right.
They're not allowed to do that at night.
No.
Late at night.
No. But yeah, you will see it during the day, but to see it or hear it at nighttime. When we were there was like a thunderstorm that was happening the outside. So it's like, is that lightning that we're seeing, or is that like the battle? Because we're like, we're not sure if this is a spirit battle that we're seeing. No, it was lightning. It wasn't anything. It was all scientifically pronounced as, a thunderstorm. We didn't see anything paranormal at that point. Kind of disappointed, but you can go horseback riding too, and that's another thing. People sit there and see, like I said, through the woods, but you can actually, they do tours on horseback. So you'll see people riding horses in period clothing too. So that can be a little, questionable of what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. Have you guys ever been to Gettysburg?
No.
I kind of want to go now. Now that I researched, I want to go.
Well, I have.
It is. I
have probably.
Oh, so go ahead.
I was going to say I studied the war when I was younger. I probably have 40 or 50 books on the Civil War, and that's one place I always wanted to go before I really the paranormal as much as I am now. Just such a historic place. I've been to Shiloh in Tennessee. That's a great place, and it's another place that's supposed to have lots of paranormal activity as well. You don't hear about it as much as you do Gettysburg, but apparently the same kind of thing. Phantom troops, troop movements at night. Cannon fire, all the same thing. But how can you not with all that energy? Negative. It's negative energy, obviously. When you have 50,000 killed and wounded, and missing in the area, there's got to be negative energy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think what we're going to do is we're going to stop it here, and then we'll pick it up again for the second part. We'll kind of talk about people's experiences and stuff like that. If you guys did any research about anybody's experience and stuff. And I'll talk about what my family experienced a little bit while we were there. So if you guys are good with that, we'll
Yeah.
end this
Yep.
one. Okay, so then I'll do
That
my
works.
normal. I'll try to do my normal. How's that? All right, until next time, our skeptics keep us grounded, our believers keep us believing. I'm Kathy. Have a good night.